hope that you had a restful Easter, although I know with press people normally these holidays are not time when you get much rest. But I hope that you had a pleasant Easter. We have, as you know, completed the local government elections, and the new councillors are being sworn in. I understand some were sworn in yesterday, some are being sworn in tomorrow, a number of them across the country. Rather strange day to have a swearing in, April Fool's Day or All Fool's Day, but I leave it to the journalists to put a twist on that one. However, I do wish to use the opportunity on behalf of the Office of the Leader Opposition and our Opposition Parliamentary Press Conference to say congratulations to all the new councillors, regardless of which party or group they represented, who will take up the mantle of local government. Clearly, the people have spoken, and in the case of the People's Progressive Party Civic, this has been a resounding vindication of its position that he was cheated but not defeated in the May 2015 elections. We're aware that threats, intimidation, and a culture of fear had crept into the elections, particularly on election day, and this continues in a number of communities, especially, I guess, in reaction to or in response to the People's Progressive Party Civic results. We have monitored the elections and have noticed that that kind of intimidation, and subtle intimidation in some ways, and we noticed the comments by some of the highest leaders of this government indicating that if people didn't vote the right way or the correct way, resources may not be flowing to them. These, I think, are very loaded statements that were made on the public platform by officials of the government. However, March 18th elections over, and as a People's Progressive Party Civic, we're very satisfied with the fact that we have shown that we have the support of the base in this country. We won by over 28,000 votes, and that in some areas we were pleased to see that we were able to, in some cases, have a split, for example, in a few areas that were traditionally controlled by the APNU-FC, or what was formerly known as the PNC. And in my own community, Industrie Plaisance, this is the first time that the PPP has been able to have equal numbers with the APNU-AFC. And we're very pleased with that development, and we hope that will help the area, as we've seen that in Kaituma, where the APNU lost, and in Mabaruma, where it was an even split. Now that that is all over, and the councillors are now going to be electing their chairs and vice chairs and their mayors and deputy mayors, I believe that we need to, as a people, to monitor the process of the establishment of these councils, and whether, and we hope not, but it seems to indicate, there seem to be indications in that direction also, that the experience of the PPC 7 RDCs which it controls may be replicated at the level of the new NDCs and MMCs or municipalities. And this I'm referring to the appointment by the government of REOs who have made life particularly difficult, if not hell, in some RDCs controlled by the People's Progressive Party. And I can go into some details on some of those regions if you so wish. And as you know, in the budget debate, we raised a number of queries, quite a lot of questions on the 10 regions in the budget debate, including the role of the regional executive offices in stymieing the progress and reversing decisions of the elected councils. So that we are, based on the threats, or what we call a threat, made by officials prior to the elections, we will now be monitoring the use and release of resources to these NDCs. We had observed in the budget 2016 debate, and we questioned the Minister of Communities about what appeared to be an inadequate allocation of funds for the 71 LAAs that would be elected in 2016, considering their financial support is governed by the Fiscal Transfer Act, as well as the fact that there were 3 new townships created where a system would be required to help them transition or convert from NDCs into municipalities. And the 3 areas, obviously Bartica, Mabaruma, and Lethem, that were formerly NDCs. There is no indication thus far by the government that this kind of transitional assistance, whether it's training, whether it is staffing, etc., and budgetary-wise, will be forthcoming. We hear a lot of comments by the government on Bartica, but we don't hear the same comments in relation to Lethem and Mabaruma. We will wait to see if the role of the appointment of the town clerks and or overseers by the government will replicate the same practice that we've seen in the appointment of REOs in the 7 RDCs that are controlled by the People's Progressive Party. If that is to happen, then this pattern is a deliberate pattern to control the communities where the people have elected their representatives based on their choice. We have to, at this press conference also, not be oblivious to the fact that more and more the culture of fear is taking place in a number of levels of our society. We are hearing more and more about extortion of members of the business community to make donations to the ruling party and or projects with the threat that they would not be considered for contracts were they not to be forthcoming with financial support. And we will be making public in the near future some instances of where this has been happening. But it is a very dangerous trend, and one in which allows for a permeation of our society with fear and intimidation. We noticed the repossession of leased state lands from farmers in the MMA in contempt of a court ruling, and we have pointed out in earlier parliamentary press briefings on the seizure or repossession of houses and house lots of persons who have titles in government housing schemes. These are dangerous trends to be monitored and to be exposed. A comment again on culture of fear, and the question is, and then the question for you, the media, is the media free and is there freedom of expression? Complaints that some media houses are not publishing letters or information from various persons that might be critical of the government or expressing an opinion that differs from the media house's allegiance or policies is becoming more frequent. Editors appear not to be merely cutting, correcting grammar, spelling, or looking for libel and removing what could be potential libel, but go beyond that by actually changing the letters. It appears the message being sent to a number of persons is better to be silent than the right and not to be attacked and not to be censored. On parliamentary matters, these are a number of issues we want to bring to your attention. First of all, in response to a statement by the Prime Minister that is published in today's Chronicle, Mr. Prime Minister appears to, again, be uninformed. His statement in the Guyana Chronicle is uninformed and inaccurate. The Parliamentary Management Committee on March 16th was called off, I'm advised, by the clerk, due to both sides having difficulties attending because of the local government elections and overseas travel. The meeting yesterday of the PNC was, I don't know if it was held or not, because the opposition stated were unavailable as most of the members were out of town. However, the statement by the Prime Minister that we seem to be not attending the committees, parliamentary committees, is absolutely inaccurate. So the PMC, we recognize that 2 meetings, one meeting was definitely postponed by the members not attending because neither side was available, and yesterday's meeting. However, the other committees, the Committee of Selection, Committee of Appointment, Public Accounts Committee, the Public Sectoral Standing Committee, Special Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Social Services, Natural Resources and Foreign Services, all have opposition members attending meetings, and in the case of the Public Accounts Committee and the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Natural Resources and Foreign Services, the opposition chairs, and those committees are meeting. We had pointed out on the floor of the House at the last sitting the problems with the Parliamentary Sectoral Committee on Economic Services. I had explained on the floor as to the problem with reference to the Commission of Inquiry relating to Gaisuco, when the government had already taken action which goes against the recommendations of the COI. And so our members were very unhappy about the fact that having sent the COI to Gaisuco, they look forward to participating in the discussion, examination of it, only to find that one of the major recommendations, or one of the first recommendations, was aborted by the government in regards to the closure of Wales Estate. Secondary and more important, and this was also raised on the floor at the last sitting, the continued presence of ministers in oversight committees that oversight the government, the Public Accounts Committee and the 4 sectoral committees. And as you know, there's no special select committee established thus far since this Parliament began in regards to any bill or motion, etc., despite requests by the opposition that major issues should go, and you will recall the anti-terrorism bill and a number of those, we called that they should go to a parliamentary special select committee. The Constitutional Reform Committee, headed by the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, and the Sectoral Committee on the Oversight of the Security Sector, chaired by the Minister of Public Security, have been appointed. But no meetings have been convened, despite repeated requests at the same PMC meetings as of recent, in February, which the Prime Minister, and this is a meeting where the Prime Minister is saying to the public, we don't attend these meetings. But 2 major committees, which the Speaker himself and the opposition have been calling for the Constitutional Reform Committee to be, a meeting to be called, and that of the Oversight Committee on the Security Sector, have not been convened, despite many requests going back to last year when it was appointed and right up to February this year. And so, as I said, and I repeat, the Prime Minister seems to be uninformed by his Chief Whip or by not being able to pay attention to these minutiae, which may not be very important in his daily work. However, there's a Commonwealth Parliamentary Association training program today and tomorrow, and we hope that this comment by the Prime Minister was deliberately to try to signal to the CPA, which has representatives from the British, the Canadian, and the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, to indicate that we are not cooperating in this Parliament. And if that is the case, we will respond in the seminar and outside of it as to the inaccuracy and misinformation being peddled by the Prime Minister today. We had said on the May 4th sitting, we had predicted that the hiatus in Parliament is a result of many government ministers being busy overseas with their travelling agenda, and we have been proven correct, as with some of their travel is publicised and others are not. However, we are aware that sometimes in the same committees that we're not supposed to be attending, according to the Prime Minister, of who is overseas from the government side, because they have to give an excuse. So that again, the travel agenda seems to be very busy. We invite the media in particular to examine the new cybercrime bill that is posted, I believe, on the Ministry of Legal Affairs website, and I believe that the Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs has had some recent consultation, I think a few weeks ago, to do with the cybercrime bill. It is important that I think from the media point of view, particularly those that are involved with internet news services and Facebook, social media and others, that the media needs to examine it from their own self-interest, as well as to help us to inform the public of the breadth of its reach with regard to people's privacy and human rights, as well as its overlap and in some cases contradiction with other statutes. This bill, whenever it is laid in the Parliament, we believe very strongly must be sent, has to be sent to a parliamentary special select committee for greater scrutiny and the inclusion of civil society in its discourse. We have noticed yesterday there's been a consultation in the Attorney General's chambers to do with the anti-money laundering bill. We are anxious to see what those amendments will produce. We are flagging for you today a particular order which was produced, and we will have more to say on this, and we may be putting out a full press statement within the next 24 hours. So I'm only indicating that this is an issue, but we will be having a full and comprehensive press statement with regard to this particular issue. Order number 6 of 2016 was made and signed by the Minister Jordan, I think, on January 29th, and put in the official gazette on February 10th. This order that was published was advising on what were items that the government in the budget debate had raised. That is, remember and these are order number 6 of 2016, just let me correct myself, deals with the value-added tax. So an order on the value-added tax, and this is to do with zero rating. So that we saw Ovaltine, Parboil Rice, the amendments to do with settlers and re-migrants goods. We saw the foreign service officers bringing home their stuff and things like that, and the zero rating on biodegradable containers for packing material. However, there's a sentence in there that has come to light, and that was that without any debate in the House, without any reference in the budget documents, without any statement by the government, that the government has revoked in Schedule 1 of the VAT Act the zero rating of heavy duty equipment such as bulldozers, etc. And I challenge any one of you who sat through the budget debate and checked the Hansards. There was not one reference in the budget speech by the minister or any other minister that of all the items being zero rated or those that now were no longer zero rated was raised on the floor of the House or in any document produced in the Parliament. And so by removing the exemption that was given to heavy-duty equipment for importation purposes, that the cost of this equipment will go up astronomically, as now the VAT of 16% will now be added to that. So I am alerting you that this is a very serious development in that it hurts the construction, the sea defense, the road defense, road projects, as well as farming, etc. Because now all these items which were zero rated will now have VAT on them. And so we will be alerting the public in relation to this. And the fact that this was done by a notice in the newspaper yesterday telling people that this is now in effect from January 29th. There are a number of issues that this order now creates from a parliamentary point of view that will now have to be raised with the Speaker, the Clerk, and are being raised with the Speaker and the Clerk in relation to how this happened in what we think are in breach of what are standing orders and how orders like this are treated, particularly of a monetary value and in relation to other parliamentary rules, so that these matters will be or have been raised and will have to be examined. In what way, if possible, efforts could be made to correct this or to reverse this, and obviously it will depend on the government's willingness to do anything about it. But most people have woken up in the last 24 hours to realize, and importers in particular who have stuff coming in, because the order, although the order had no date on it of when it came into effect, the notice that was published in the newspapers made it put into effect in January. And therefore, this is another issue to do with parliamentary practices that are now will have to be challenged. So I leave the major issues that will have to come from that. Those are the matters. So local government, culture affair, parliamentary matters, including parliamentary committees, and responding to the Prime Minister, and also matters to do with other issues. I had said when the last sitting of Parliament that the government's agenda seems to be very thin, unimaginative, etc. Thus far, and I assume that they will do what they should do as a government, that prior to May 4th they will then throw on piles of bills and motions, etc., etc. We look forward to having an active Parliament and a busy Parliament. But thus far, and there are timelines and datelines for when things have to be submitted, etc. Government obviously has shorter timelines than the opposition, but at this point it still looks very thin, and we are waiting to see what the agenda will be on May the 4th. So I open the floor. Any questions, any comments? Yes, Mr. Harris.
Adam Harris, Prime News.
Yes.
Are you in a position to say whether there were changes in the control of local government areas looking back to 94 and then measuring them against this time around?
Yes, the party has done that. I don't have that on me, but there has been an examination of that by the party. I'll just give again the one that I'm familiar with, and that is Industry Plaisance, my area. And I don't know if anybody else in this room lives there, but oh, you from Industry Plaisance? Good. So that in the 94 elections, we did not win. We did not get even half of the seats and so forth, and now it is moved to 9-9. One of the reasons, I mean, not, yeah, I've forgotten the seats now, 8-8 or 9-9. So that, I mean, I'm just using it as an example of where we have done an examination of the votes that came this time, and the division of the seats. I think clearly that when one examines the results, if we look at 94 in Georgetown or Linden, the voter turnout, etc., and the voter turnout now, and the number of voters was higher. The number of voters in 2016 was 112,000, and about 43,000 voted in Georgetown. In Linden, it was about 23,000, and 8,000 voted. So the percentages may have been similar, 35 in some cases. I think Georgetown the last time was in the 40%. It's slightly lower this time. The same thing with Linden. In other areas, which are PPP civic areas, the turnout was higher than even 94, because the view in a number of the PPP areas post 92 elections, well, we got government, so don't worry about local government. A lot of the grassroots view was, and so we have seen a much higher turnout of persons in areas that have been traditionally PPP civic. One of the concerns that have been raised by a number of people at the constituency levels has been the fact that the voters list has, let's use a hypothetical, the voters list has 2,000 names for a given NDC. You do house to house, you can't find these 2,000 people. You can't find 200, you can't find 300. Sometimes in some cases people say, well, they've gone abroad or they're next door, they've moved to another region. And again, the people haven't transferred. So they haven't done transfer. This was an issue that came up in a number of areas, that you went house to house, you just couldn't find these people. And in some cases, late in the day, in one or two areas, we found names of persons on people's addresses that those people didn't know. And so that showed a weakness too, that we needed to make sure that if that were so, that, say, people were on my address, that I should have gone and said to Election Commission that I don't know these people. However, GCOM had traditionally been reluctant to remove names, even on that basis. And we had that experience in 2015 and again in this time, that names were on addresses that could not be found, but GCOM did not wish to move them, even in some cases where people said, I don't know these people at all. And so even if in the couple of examples we found just before the elections where we could not have made an objection, but the point I'm trying to make is that the list, there is a view that the list needs to be reviewed, and that either we go back into a new house-to-house registration, and of course the issue of electronic voting needs to be examined and by the political parties and obviously by the GCOM for the future.
Mr. Chair, a quick follow-up on your comment before you open for questions. The Prime Minister's criticizing APP for not attending the PMC meeting.
Yeah, I spoke on that in detail before you came. Yes, I'll give you a special after, as Adam has got it all. Anil, are you?
He's supposed to be there.
No. Anil, you're coming here?
Yeah, let me see. I had the,
Because I indicated this may be an issue you may be dealing with. Yeah. Is this yours? Yeah. Well, I told you that we would be putting out a press statement, and we were anticipating Mr. Lanalal's attendance, but I didn't want to get you all excited, and he was unable to come. So we now can deal with the issue of Order Number 6 of 2016.
Thank you very much, Comrade Gail Teixeira. Good morning, members of the media. The Office of the Leader of the Opposition notes with deep concern the continuous assault being carried out by this government on the productive sectors of our economy. The latest assault is amendments to the Value Added Tax Act by an order number 6 of 2016, which was laid in the National Assembly on the 12th of February 2016. This order imposes inter alia 16% VAT on large capital equipment such as bulldozer, excavator, tractor, or similar heavy-duty industrial machine, which hitherto enjoyed exemptions from VAT. This new measure will have dire financial and economic implications for almost every one of the nation's productive sector, including agriculture, mining, forestry, industrial, etc. Indeed, it would skyrocket the price of equipment to which it applies. We also wish to register our objections to the way that this order was imposed. It was done without any consultation whatsoever, without any public statement whatsoever, without any prior notice or notice at all even to the sectors that would be affected by this measure. It was simply laid in the National Assembly and formed part of a long list of exemptions from VAT. In short, it was almost surreptitiously inserted in a list of exemptions, clearly conveying the impression that its architects were not desirous of revealing its true nature, purport, and effect. It would be recalled that both in and out of the National Assembly, we canvassed for the removal of similar draconian measures which were part of the 2016 budget. For example, the ban against the importation of vehicles that were 8 years old and under. This measure was intended to apply to every class of motor vehicles, but it was only after we raised objections that it was confined to motor cars. We are now witnessing another blow to the private sector. We call upon the government to immediately reverse this measure. We wish to remind them that many of our productive sectors are currently ailing. This would simply lead to greater decline in production and more economic stagnation. I consulted with one importer who has prepared for me a list of equipment and the prices of those equipment currently without VAT and the prices of those equipment when VAT would have to be applied to them. And if I may quickly read a couple. A CAT 321C excavator, the VAT-free price is currently 10 million. When VAT is added to that, it will be 11,600,000. A CAT 318BL excavator, the VAT-free price is 15 million. When VAT is added to it, it will be 17,400,000. The CAT 320CL excavator, the price is 20 million, VAT-free. When VAT is added to it, it will be 23,200,000. The, let me see, the CAT D4A bulldozer, the VAT-free price is 12 million. If VAT is added to it, it will be 13,920,000. The Ford tractor, that is the small tractor, the VAT-free price is 4 million. If VAT is added to it, it will be 4,640,000. The larger tractor, that is the Ford 7910 tractor, which the VAT-free price is 5 million. When VAT is added to it, it will be 5,800,000. And the large tractor, which is 6 million VAT-free, when VAT is added to it, it will be 6,960,000. And I have a longer list of 16 million for the paver. When VAT is added to that, it will be 18,560,000. And so you have these widespread increase in prices that will result from the imposition of VAT on a number of equipment which hitherto enjoyed VAT exemption, and the government did not see it fit to offer a single word of explanation to the people of this country to hold any consultation whatsoever. So you have a rice industry, a sugar industry, agriculture industry, mining industry, forestry industry, all that are ailing, and then a government that's supposed to be facilitating these industries, supposed to be assisting these industry with concessionary and other measures, are removing concessions from these industries. So, you have the devastating consequences. Ms. Teixeira, in her opening remarks, spoke about the consultations which have been held and which are continuing to be held by the Attorney General in relation to the AML-CFT legislation. Now, I was invited and I requested from the Attorney General office the FATF, CFATF recommendations, because in this particular exercise of legislative reform, it is recommendation driven, these recommendations coming from FATF and CFATF. If those recommendations are not circulated, then the consultation is going to be a waste of time. Well, not a waste of time, but less than fruitful. Because you are not here legislating at large. You are legislating with the ultimate objective of incorporating recommendations. So if you are inviting persons to consult, then you cannot only give them the bill, you have to also give them the regime of recommendations that bill is intended to capture, to implement, and to incorporate. When I asked for those recommendations, they were not forthcoming. Yesterday, when the consultations were held, I was asked to make a comment to a particular press outfit, and I pointed out that I requested the recommendations and I did not receive them, and that is the main reason why I didn't attend. And those comments of mine were published this morning, and I got an email from the AG Chambers this morning of the recommendations.
And it's finished.
And the consultations are finished because they were held yesterday. And we continue to maintain that the proper forum for these consultations to be done is the Parliamentary Select Committee. There you have the experts, you have the draftspersons, you are able to study the recommendations, members of the public can be invited, the FATF people can be invited, and different sectors can be invited, Bank of Guyana, because, as I said, this is a regime of legislation that imposes responsibility on a number of important players. And you cannot just impose these responsibilities on these people. You have to sit with every single sector and work out the modalities of how they will discharge these responsibilities. First of all, you have to make them understand the nature and purpose and effect of the responsibilities that you are assigning to them. Because by law, you are imposing on a host of agencies responsibilities that you expect them to discharge as part of executive government to help you in keeping law and order in the country. And we are saying that the Attorney General Chambers is not the best forum. We would prefer, and we are the elected officials anyhow. People elected us to help to implement the laws of this country. And this continuous holding of consultations outside of the parliamentary process, we view it as undermining parliamentary democracy. So those are the few points that I wanted to make at this point in time.
May I
Yeah, I think just to add a caveat, and that is that we're not against consultations, but we are against the use of consultations as an alternative or as a supplement
That's correct.
to what is the parliamentary process. and the scrutiny that parliamentarians are required to give to any bill. Adam, Mr. Harris.
No, it's all right, Adam, still. At this forum, we looked at the removal of certain concessions. However, on the government side, they have been talking about the abuse of concessions. For example, land contracts that people entered into and didn't adhere to the housing thing. I think you have some matters in court, Mr. Nandlal. Is it that we are opposed to restrictions on what could very well be the abuse of some of the concessions?
I'm not the lawyer, but I'll deal politically, and that is if people have leases for land and they are not in default according to the law, then under what grounds you can repossess them? And therefore it is the capriciousness of these actions and what is targeting populations. The house lot issue, the people, and Mr. Landlal has spoken at an early press conference here in detail about some of these issues. Obviously the government under the law has a number of rights. The point is that the government appears to be irresponsible, in contempt of court ruling in relation to what people's legal occupation, legal documentation to show that they're not squatters. The government isn't removing squatters. We have squatters still. We try to regularize as a government squatting settlements.
Yeah.
And we regularize. I remember up to the figures I had a couple of years ago was about 10,000 people had been regularized in what were former squatting areas in different regions. I am not aware that this government is going after squatters, people who are illegally occupying land or illegally occupying reserves. I don't see that happening. What they're going after is people who have legal, that they have either titles or leases that are in order. And that's the issue. It's not a question of saying the government has no right, but the government must not act capriciously or against the law. And it must not be used as a political weapon against various groups, whether it's of ethnicity or political affiliation or geography.
If I may be permitted to add, Adam, I believe, is referring to lands given for a particular purpose and for things to be done with those lands within given time frames, and they were not done. Those contracts provide for what remedial actions can be taken when there are defaults of the type to which you are referring. Here we are speaking about VAT exemptions, concessions that were given specifically, and the VAT regime or the concessionary regime that exists in Guyana, they exist in almost every country in the world, more particularly the developing country. Prior to us having VAT in Guyana, these equipment, because they are connected to the productive sector, they enjoyed exemptions from consumption taxes. And they were always duty-free. So there is always in every economy, in the civilized world, in the developmental world, a regime of taxation that grants concession to the productive sectors of the country. Even the great United States of America has a very, very generous regime that helps its agricultural sector. This government, however, does not seem to believe that that is an important factor in the developmental and productive equation of our country. And that is the strange thing, that is what we are objecting to. I don't understand the economic theory that they are using. Their view seems to be to extract taxation dollar from the populace as its major source of income. So they don't
Economic
give
activity.
concessions, they tax. That is their philosophy. So that is what I'm objecting to. And then reference was made to the leases and the house lots. Every single one of those houses that the attempt to revoke those transports and titles, which I'm challenging in the court, every one of those persons claim that they are still in occupation, that they have not violated. But more importantly, a transport is an order of court. An order of court can only be revoked by an order of court, can be revoked by an executive officer, If ever the law of this country is that an executive officer of a government can revoke our title, then we are all in a very, very perilous state. In relation to the lands, the MMA lease lands, the High Court has ruled that MMA cannot revoke lands granted by the President. That only the President can revoke lands, leases granted by him. That's okay. But it doesn't mean that the President have a plenitude of power to revoke for any reason. He must have a reason recognized by the law. So if Adam Harris has a lease in his name, and Adam Harris is obeying all the conditions of the lease, the President, on behalf of the landlord, who is the state of Guyana, cannot revoke that lease. You have to show that the tenant is in violation of a condition of the lease, and that condition of the lease, its violation, qualifies for revocation. So, while the President may be immune from suit, his actions are not immune from suit. And that is why we intend to challenge the President's revocation of those leases. What they have done is to move the revocating authority from MMA to the President, which is the right thing. The President has to revoke. And that's the right thing now. But the President doesn't have untrammeled powers of revocation. The power to revoke a lease is regulated by law. And that is why we will challenge the President's revocation of those leases.
No further, Margaret. If you can go back to the removal of tax exempt for these machinery, the bullets and stuff. You said the motion, the bill was passed in National Assembly.
But it was not a bill.
It's not a bill.
It was an order.
It was an order that granted a list of exemptions on Milo, on Ovaltine,
Parboiled.
on parboiled rice,
Let's see here.
and then in the middle of it, one line says that it imposes VAT. So in an exemption
No, it
notice,
doesn't even say it. It says it revokes one subclause.
one order that
Right?
when you read
so
what
if
it
you're
says.
reading the whole thing, you're reading all these zero rating, and in the middle of the zero rating, that's what Mr. Nanlal is saying. There's a sentence that says revoking this clause, subclause. So you're reading through, and there are 8 items, all dealing with zero rating, and in between is this other line that says this is revoked. It was an order, and the clerk should have advised that the order either has to have a negative or affirmative resolution. Orders, remember the one to do with the salary increases. Remember the whole issue of the salary increases. It had to have had to be passed in the Parliament by a negative resolution, and the whole debate on the 40 days and how long and all that kind of stuff had to be gone through. Any order has to go through either a negative resolution or an affirmative resolution in the Parliament, right? And so there are other orders that have been brought that I've seen have not been put on the agenda for affirmative. And so we've raised this with the clerk, that the orders can't just be circulated and come into effect like that. And in the case where either side, government or opposition, is uncertain about whether this is where the Chief Parliamentary Counsel and the clerk advise either side of the House of what is required, you know.
You see what they have done, they have all say order numbers, section number so and so, schedule number so and so is hereby revoked.
Yeah.
But you don't know what is it. You have to now go and check the Principal Act and go through a whole long list of schedules, and then you realize what they have done.
I think the main issue on this is there are issues in how you treat an order, and there are, as I said, parliamentary matters. But what is most disturbing is that, as I said at the beginning, and Mr. Nanlal has said it too, that there was no prior notice of this coming in the budget speech, in the speeches by the ministers, any statement by the government, and so it becomes rather sinister what has happened. If a minister had got one, just like he talked about parboiled rice and giving duty-free for foreign services returning and settlers and migrants, and he had raised this, then it would have been debated on the floor of the House. The public would know about it. Everybody would know about it. That's where the mischief is. We can bore you and we could talk to you a long time about parliamentary procedures and what could have happened and what we now need to do, and that's what we have to deal with. But that's not the crux of the matter. The crux is the matter that this was appears to have been surreptitiously brought by silence, and this is becoming a habit of the government. No one knew that there was a minister, what do you call it, presidential advisor on business, which goes back to January, and was, I know you wanted to ask that. There's some other issues I want. But here is and you will recall, for those of you in Parliament, that the questions were asked of Mr. Harman and the Prime Minister about the presidential advisors.
Yeah.
We asked, and the list was read out. Mr. B.K. Tiwari's name was not on the list. No, a minister. We asked ministers too, by the way. We asked ministers who their advisors were. Most ministers, when they were asked, refused to give the names because Minister Trotman got up and said we don't have to give names, when he knew in the previous Parliament we were demanded, we had to provide the names of all contract workers, their positions, their names and their salaries, and all advisors. That's how all you knew in 2010 what Odinga and I were getting. Because Sheila Holder demanded name all the advisors, because she had a view that there were all these presidential advisors, and ended up with 2 that were presidential advisors. And that's how the whole thing began. And so the question was asked on the floor, who are the presidential advisors? We were given a list of so many, but we have learned since of others who were presidential advisors who were not named in the budget debate. For example, Mr. Eric Phillips. Secondly, then, we learned more recently that Mr. B.K. Tiwari was the advisor to the Minister of Business, which the Minister of Business says he didn't know. I don't know, and I don't know. I leave it to you to unravel that. But the point is that he was appointed apparently in January. We raised on the floor of the House, each minister was asked, who are the advisors? When we went to the, the estimates. You remember? We did it in that one. And most ministers would not give us the name of their advisors. And so he was not named there either. And so it seems to be just the sojourn to China brought this to the attention of the people and of the media and everybody else. So this habit of the government, which appears to be a habit, a growing habit, of not telling people anything until you suddenly wake up one morning and find it. And I go back to the announcements, the order in September 2015 announcing the salary increases when we had just broken for recess.
Yeah.
We just stopped on, I think it was September the 10th. The salary increases came out for September the 25th, 2015, and
No
backdating it to beginning on July the 1st, I think it was. The same thing with when the travel allowances. Travel allowances were not told. People were not informed. Yet this was a cabinet decision from June 2015, shortly after being all sworn in. All the travel allowances were changed. There's more coming. We've raised with the Parliament that a number of allowances have been changed for parliamentarians, which the law says your allowance is this, actually states the amount. And yet we have noticed they're increased. And we've gone to the clerk and said, this can't happen. The bill has to be amended. The bill has not been brought. This is months ago we've raised this. So that, and then we discover there's a cabinet decision also that increases the parliamentary allowances if you're a vice president or a prime minister versus if you're a minister versus if you're a member of parliament. None of this is public. And so we keep saying that this slippage, we're on a slippery slope when it comes to managing the lawmaking role of this government. The government seems to think that it could just, by doing all sorts of things, change what is happening in this country, what is legally allowed. And so we are concerned this is a very dangerous pattern emerging, and the government needs to correct itself, or it's going to lead to some very, very serious issues emerging in this country. You wanted to ask a question?
Just a question of clarity, because
Yes.
we spoke about more advisors to the government and the president that the opposition parties are aware of.
Yes.
That's not how the Republic will be. If you could point us to some names, if you could give us a number of how many more.
I gave you one name. You find the
Any
rest.
more names? Or a
Mr.
number
Corbyn
of
Mr. Corbyn is an advisor.
I had said, I believe right
Mr.
here.
Eric Phillips is an advisor. Those one, Mr. Corbyn wasn't mentioned in the budget debate. Mr. Robert Corbyn, that is.
But is there
Right.
sorry.
You have, we
There are
read in the
25
papers,
diaspora.
huh?
Yes,
And then,
but-
of course, the ones we've asked about long in the earlier press conferences right here about the advisors appointed overseas. They're appointed by the president, we understand, and we asked about their conditions. We asked that on the floor of the House since last year. We asked again about it in the budget. We got nothing. So we
25
don't know.
in North America.
You know, we don't know. I mean, we see photographs of some APNU conference or AFC conference, and then you hear that these people advise, and the instruments are being handed over on behalf of the president. But is there an official list? We haven't seen that.
And apart from the secrecy, do you have any other objections to how these appointments are being made, or who these appointments are being handed out?
The fundamental issue of any government is some level of transparency and accountability, and the APNU AFC said they were going to be transparent and accountable when they put down this wicked PPPC government. And they are becoming less transparent and accountable than any other government we've had in this country, probably, even Hoyt. And so the issue is that they are not, the selection, governments, ministers, presidents have rights to appoint advisors. But presidential advisors, too, have to act as the president's lieutenant or president's men. I mean men, not in a gender issue. And so presidential advisors are not expected to do certain things or allowed to do certain things. So the charade that Mr. Phillips is carrying on, including accusing me of being racist, this is coming in for an advisor. It would have been unthinkable for me as a president advisor to both President Ramatar and to President Jagdeo to use the press to carry out discord in our country and to accuse another person of being racist. You have advisors to ministers who are using Facebook that is dripping with race. We have appealed to those ministers to please talk to these advisors who are attacking not only individuals in the opposition from a racial point of view, but are also saying to Indian Guyanese that, you know, you're stupid, you're ignorant because you're voting for the PPP. This is on their websites. We've actually taken that, not websites, what do you call it, Facebook. We've actually showed this to one minister in particular, begged him. This is against the country, it's against the people. These are not John Brown. If Mr. Phillips is an ordinary citizen like me, he has certain levity, I guess, in certain ways, but he still can't disobey the Constitution and the laws of this country. But you can't, when you take on the mantle of government and representing government, you cannot be doing these things at what we're seeing in the media. And as I said, the Facebook is much worse, much worse. So governments, I recognize, have a right to put advisors. Ministers, this new tragedy of ministers having advisors, that's a new development. The issue obviously must be, one, the constraint of finances, and also having qualified people who will act in the interest of the country. And I would question some of the persons who are advisors or that little I know about, of their qualifications or their suitability to do the jobs they're being asked to do.
And the 25 in America, in North America, they were appointed at party events.
Yeah,
Right? PNC event in Florida and an AFC event in Toronto.
yeah.
I want to ask whether it matters if these titles are mere honorific, you know, just a title.
Is $500,000 honorific? Is a oh, you mean the advisors overseas
The
or
advisors,
well we
both
don't
overseas and
well,
local.
okay, first of all is a difference we don't know about, and that is that we've asked, are these advisors overseas? What is
What are
they're
the
doing?
terms?
What are the terms? What are they being paid? Are they not being paid? Are they like, you know, the consulates, the honorary consulates, where you get a little stipend, but you use your office, and what role is it? We can't get answers on that. So it's unfair to ask that question because you're asking the wrong people to answer that. We're asking the same question. Secondly, the advisors, these advisors are not honorific titles. They come with money, diplomatic passports.
Well, you said Brian Tiwari was honorific.
But
But
I
he
don't know,
has a
that's
dip-
after the fact.
But did he get a diplomatic passport?
I don't know.
You're a diplomat of the country, you know.
An
I'm
advisor,
told that he has a diplomatic passport which will be rescinded upon his return. That's what I was told.
but to go back to the advisors, because presidential advisors are provided for. There's provision for, in the past parliament, past government, a number of ministers had what was called personal assistants or personal persons like that. But these new government ministers have personal assistants and advisors, and in fact the secretariats of the ministers are rather large, particularly for some ministries that are rather small. And so these are matters that they're not being transparent on. You know, you're asking. We learned in the debate, I think, that the Prime Minister had 17 what do you call liaison officers that are
Yeah.
going to be assigned to the regions
Throughout the country.
throughout the country. I went to one region recently and was told of a person being sent in to be the liaison officer of that region. When I asked whether it's assigned to the RDC, no, it's coming from the Prime Minister's office and will be the liaison on regional matters with the Prime Minister's
No.
office. So it's not there to assist the RDC. It's more like a information intelligence operator.
Adam, I know that you're a good investigative journalist. I do a television program weekly in Barbados, and a few people called in to tell me that the Prime Minister's sister-in-law, Mavis Nagamutu, has an office in Port Morant, and she is working there. It's an office of an annex of the office of the Prime Minister, and she's doing work for the Prime Minister in Port Morant. And these are the people who used to go on every house top and bawl about cronyism and family and friends benefiting.
But we don't know she's paid.
Go find that out for me, please.
There's an issue being paid and usurpation of title. Adam, you know very well
The office
that
can be
I
paid
could be
for.
unpaid, but I have a title,
Alright.
and therefore I hold sway. I can do things with that title. I can represent. I can open doors. I can close doors. There are a range of things that title gives you, whether there's money or not. But the advisors that we asked about in the Parliament was what based on the budget allocations and the contractual and other arrangements. Because remember, it's Mr. Ram that said that the size of the contractual workers increased by 1,000 between May 2015 and February 2015. He said that. He calculated it. And so it's very clear when you went into budget. We asked those questions. The names that were presented, but there are others, and therefore we're saying why. It is only because Mr. Phillips has opened his mouth that most people now know that he's a presidential advisor.
And
He's a presidential advisor.
this same
And it's not honorific, my dear Mr. Adams. He is being paid.
this lady was also a candidate for the APNU AFC at the local government elections for the local authority area of Wim Bloomfield. The same person.
Mr. Shearer, if I could-
Yes.
if I could take you back to your comments on race.
Yeah.
and ask
My
you-
comments on race? I didn't make any comment on
No,
race.
You spoke about race earlier.
Yes, yes,
involving
yes.
Mr. Phillips. But if I'm sure you would have seen in the press the police announcement about seeking persons who are supporters or members of the PDP who've had racial inciting comments to make on Facebook. My first question would be...
I haven't seen that.
You're not aware.
I'm not aware of that.
You need to miss that.
That the police have said that? They're going after PPP people?
No, they did say that.
No, they didn't say
They have a
PVP people.
particular Facebook post, and some people.
Someone from New York or something? I didn't
Well,
understand what that was
a
about.
fellow from Canada sent a letter to me denying any involvement. I saw that yesterday.
Yeah. All I'm saying is that I don't know about. I don't
No,
have I don't have a Facebook address. First of all, however, the role of a particular advisor to a particular minister has made such racist comments, in particular for me and Bishop Edghill, and to the general membership and supporters of the People's Progressive Party,
I know, I see.
that some people were so offended that they shared with us snippets, which we shared with the minister, begging the minister that this is an advisor on an issue, on an area that is about cohesion and inclusion, and therefore these statements are detrimental to him and the government and the people of this country. Nothing has happened.
In a wider sense, though, would you support legitimate investigations and subsequent charges of those actions? Against who?
I don't know. Anna is a lawyer. We have no law to do with the internet in terms of libel and defamation on the internet. And so the Brits have amended their laws. And this is something that we were exploring when we were doing the Broadcasting Act, and then decided that didn't fall into the ambit of the Broadcasting Act. But they amended their laws to put the onus on the service providers, so people can make complaints to the service provider, and if the service provider does nothing, then the person can go to court. This is where defamation, slander, character assassination, stuff like that. And so we don't have that provision. Now, in the cybercrime bill, is there provision there for that or not? And that's why I suggested to you that this needs to have public debate as well as go before a special select committee. Whether the police in Guyana can come knocking at my door and say that you have a Facebook saying this and this, and we're going to charge you, I'm not sure. I don't know legally what that means. But the service provider, and the cases that took place in the UK were where people complained to, because somebody was slandering somebody, and they went to Yahoo and complained, and Yahoo did nothing, and then they went to the courts, and Yahoo was then, but based on their law, which allowed for that. The Telecommunications Act bill, which was drafted and had 2 attempts in the Parliament under the PPP, and which was thwarted. The bill is still, we hear the government talking about it, we hear the private sector demanding it. But in that bill, outside of the very highly technical areas, was also the areas of putting responsibilities on the service providers to do with the services they offer and stuff like that, including the internet. But that would have, but that has not surfaced. And as the internet changes and information technology changes, these laws will have to be looked back, because this draft we did was going back a couple of years ago. Well, no, it went through major changes and went before Parliamentary Select Committee in 2012, 2013, which Mr. Greenwich headed. And that's why we find disturbing on the telecommunications bill, why they're not bringing it. They're the ones who stopped it twice. Then in the Parliamentary Select Committee, headed by Mr. Greenwich, and Prime Minister Sam Hines was part of it, they were almost finished it. And we have the version that was amended by the committee, not all of which we may have agreed to as a government, but the majority was done by the committee in consensus. And so why they're not bringing that bill? Because it needs to regulate and liberalize, modernize the telecommunications sector, which is badly needed. And so these are areas, I think, that have to be dealt with. I'm not going to be sucked into the issues of what other people are saying on Facebook. I'm dealing with what are public statements by members on I commented on the advisors to do with Facebook, but the statements made in the media by a presidential advisor who happens to chair a committee, in which there were statements made that go against the CARICOM Commission on Reparations, which the Reparations Committee is part of, and also did not put forward views that were inimical, one, to history, archaeology, anthropology, and everything else in this country, as well as ethnicity. The attempts by some people to answer this, including, I believe, the editor of Stabic News, and one time, because Mr. Phillips has mentioned her name and my name in one breath. I don't know why he's doing that, but he is. So, but the point is that he has written 4 letters between March the 14th and yesterday. 4 letters. The attempts by people to answer, all our letters have been butchered, slaughtered, cut, rearranged by the when we submitted to the media houses. Right? And it's not only my letter. It's not only my letter. It's not my letter only. I've just and the fact that I never use the word racist in my thing. I talk biased, prejudiced, divisive, sowing discord, targeting different groups, and denigrating different groups. His response, and the newspapers took out a word I had in mind, was ethno-political act, to do with the closing down of the Amerindian land titling GRIF project unit. One of the media houses removed that. So I figured they were sensitive, maybe they thought I was whatever. But the fact that the newspaper also prints headlines that I'm racist. You have someone accusing me of being a racist. I can go now, because it's not Facebook, I can go to the courts. I'm not interested, because I know the courts are a waste of time on issues of defamation. I've got a case since 1985 still in the court for defamation on the PCD from Mr. Hamilton Green.
But are you not
And so the issue is that there are complaints coming from people. There are a number of letters in response to Mr. Phillips that people are saying that were cut, slashed, etc. I agree that my letter was long, but nevertheless, the man has written 4 letters. And anytime anybody tries to respond to one aspect, they're being attacked personally. And the editors of the newspapers seem to find this okay. Yes, someone wanted to ask a question?
Outside of the legal question of what can be prosecuted in Facebook, you've mentioned that you printed a Facebook post, took it to a minister, and asked that minister to speak to his advisor.
Yes.
Would you, as a representative of the People's Progressive Party Civic, speak to your supporters, or those who claim to be your supporters and are uttering on Facebook and other social media sites racially divisive claims, and in some cases treasonous claims because they're threats against ministers and the president? Could you, as a representative, or would you, as a representative of the People's Party Civic, advise them to desist?
I don't know. I'm not on Facebook. In principle, my whole political life has been against racism of any kind. That's my life. And I challenge anybody in this country, from the time I've been in politics, to find any aspect of me that tolerates, stands up, supports racial division and racism in this country, and ethnic discrimination. And therefore, for me personally and the PBP, it will not be accepted and tolerated. However, the point I'm making is not about individuals. I'm talking about people in holding office. And that's a completely different issue. So when the argument came up, and no, but I'm not deviating from that. I am not the monitor of Facebook in this country. I can say to our members, as other parties must say to their members, stop it. And all parties must. And the newspapers
Are you
too.
saying that now? Stop it?
I am talking to you. I mean, what do you think? I have a whip that I can make people do it?
No, I'm just asking you, are you going to say clearly, stop it?
Madam, I have said it. You interpret how and why I said it and how I said it. You interpret it. I am not aware that in a press conference that we're getting into ideological discussions, but I thought that this was not a debate, this is a press conference, and you're a journalist. But, and I would like then, if the tables are turned, if we are going to turn this into a debate, then I would very much enjoy asking the journalists in this room certain questions and turn the table. Because journalists have been reluctant, any time you're in a press conference, that the questions are turned on them, right? And then quickly the answer is a press conference and you're the subject. So I have no problem. I have no problem. I enjoy debates, and we could debate. But in the context of a press conference, that the issue is that you're the journalist and I'm the subject for that moment. There was another question from somebody else.
Very quick.
Yes.
What can you
That's
do in
really what-
reference with what's going on with regular Guyanese people? It's something we also saw in 2011.
Yeah, throughout.
With threats similar, like what she spoke about, threats against, if Donald Raptar was elected president, he'll be executed, and
Yeah.
that sort of stuff. We saw that in 2011. Do you think the Ministry of Social Cohesion needs to probably have a wider discussion on the issue?
But of course. But in prior to 2011, we remember how the whole story came up in the broadcasting aspects to do with one station where a caller called in and said what he would do to Jagdeo. And the whole issue of the delay mechanisms came in and putting in your delay timers and the issue, and then there was this demand for the Broadcasting Act to regulate and so on and so on. And so there are irresponsible people out there. There's no political party can control all its members from top to bottom. However, and that goes for any country, that's not just Guyana. And so if you're looking at Trump, you would wonder who's controlling what is going on there. And if anyone can control Trump. The issue is that, the issue though is that obviously all political parties have a responsibility by constitution and law to try to ensure that the constitutional laws are upheld and human rights are upheld, right? But that doesn't mean that political parties, nor the PPP in particular, as you address PPP, and not all the political parties, that whether we have a spying eye to keep an eye on all our members throughout every day, 24 days across the country. We have no such capacity. We have no such capacity. However, persons in official capacity are there to serve all the people, whether they voted for them or against them. And that was the argument that was made in relation to the green and yellowing of Guyana, and it was the issue to do with religion, and now to do with this issue you're raising, that people can wear and should be allowed to wear whatever colors they want, whenever they want. But when you are the president or prime minister or vice presidents or ministers, you are there to represent all the people. And therefore, when you're wearing your party colors at state functions, government functions, it is a subliminal message to other people that they don't belong, or you now have to be identified with this. The painting of buildings in what are party colors, government buildings, I don't care what the AFC and APNU paint their buildings or their own personal cars. That's their business. But not when it comes to government property. And so these are maybe gray areas that not everybody understands. But the issue is a very, very important distinction between what is an individual right and individual choices versus what is the state and the government. And so it's a very, very important issue. And so too with religion, that we are a secular state. And therefore, we must not disrespect any religion, but we also make sure that we are not propagating by the state any particular religion. And I think that has been a mantra that has been part of this country for a long time. And in the 50th anniversary, this is something that we should not allow to be reversed, these areas. They came through hard struggle, and they became part of the tapestry of what is Guyana, what is the fabric of Guyana. And that we see as being changed, and and people must feel offended by it, and they do. Yeah, who else had a question? Adam.
In all fairness, now this is a statement. The then President Agnew, I remember turning up for the press conference with a green shirt, and he said, "You look good." And he said, "I'm not ceding any color to any political party."
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's our position, except that as the President, Jagdeo, that he did not turn up at state functions in red, gold, and black, which is our party colors.
He turned up in red shirts.
You could turn in red shirts, but you didn't see the total combination. And so at party functions, we all have the right to wear party colors. And no one must ever interfere with that right. But you can't legislate against. But when one official keeps wearing a green shirt to every function,
He's on the job.
eh?
He's on the job.
No, I know that he has a whole wardrobe full of them, actually. He admitted that. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Have a good day.
I don't see him.
I'm around them.